Hey you, welcome back to Amusement ASMR, where thrill meets chill. Today we continue my adventures in Australia from earlier this year with the next theme park that I visited in Queensland, Gold Coast, SeaWorld. And here are the park maps from SeaWorld. Now, SeaWorld is one of several theme parks owned by Village Roadshow, and they have great multi-day, multi-ticket deals, multi-park ticket deals. So I decided to get their 3-day, 3-park escape pass that was $179 in Australian, or about 117 US dollars, which is a pretty good deal for 3 days at 3 parks. It was valid at 3 parks, but I only ended up using it at 2 parks. So one of those 3 parks was a water park, which I decided not to visit at this trip. But the first of those 3 parks or rather 2 parks I ended up using it for, that I visited was SeaWorld Resort, where families can be anything at SeaWorld Resort. So we're going to get to this pamphlet about the animal adventures in a little bit. But first we are going to get started looking at the whole theme park map. This is the map, of course, and it's in a grid-like system, A through S along here and 1 through 7 along here, and then all of the attractions and rides and food and shopping locations are designated by their intersection of a letter and a number. So that's how actually a lot of the Australian theme parks maps are laid out, as you'll see in other videos. So here's the logo for Village Roadshow theme parks. As you can see, there are several parks owned by Village Roadshow. There's SeaWorld here, but also Movie World, Wet n Wild, which is their water park, Paradise Country, and the Australian Outback Spectacular, which are 2 other kind of experiences that you can opt to do that are very classic Australian experiences. These are the parks that you could get admission to, and the 3-park, 3-day pass I got, the escape pass, was good for these first 3 parks. It was good for Movie World, SeaWorld, and Wet n Wild. So let's go into the first day that I used my escape pass at SeaWorld. Now, I arrived at the park at 9:42 a.m. and the park opened at 10 a.m. And I'm so glad I got there a little early. I caught the bus. I was staying in Surfers Paradise, and I caught the local bus up to the SeaWorld stop, which is actually on this map here. There's this road, and here's the park entrance. The main entry's right here, and here's the parking lot. The bus stop is just down the road here a bit. Imagine it's about here. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. You can imagine it's about here on the map, down from the parking lot. So I got off the bus and walked through the parking lot up to the main entry. And when I got there at 9:40-ish, there was already quite a few people waiting to get in, to rope drop, as it were. And so I got in line, and I'm so glad I did, again, because before the park even opened, that line behind me was about double what it was in front of me. So very glad I got there early for this day. I think this was on a Friday. So really glad I got there early. And then they let us in right at 10 a.m. on the dot. So some parks do let you in a little bit early, but not Gold Coast SeaWorld, apparently. But I walked in right at 10 a.m. because I was nice and close to the front of that line. So then, once I was in the entryway, a lot of folks I noticed just started hovering over here at the SeaWorld lake. They just went to the right here and just started hanging out, and I realized they were going there for the stunt show, which is up here, the Thunder Lake stunt show at the SeaWorld Lake, Q4, which is and 4, which is right here. And there was a morning show. There were a few show times for the stunt show throughout the day, and I knew I wanted to see it, being a former stunt woman myself. Not a water stunt woman, granted, but stunt woman nonetheless. I could appreciate other professionals. And in general, I just love those kinds of shows. So I definitely wanted to see that, but I figured I'd have time to see one of the later shows. So I did not prioritize that because my usual rope drop strategy, again, is usually to ride the most popular rides in the park first. That is my go-to rope drop strategy at any theme park. So in this park, there are 3 roller coasters that are the most popular. And that's Leviathan right here. And then past that, it's the Jet Rescue Coaster here and the Storm Coaster here. And those 2 are next to each other. The Jet Rescue Coaster and the Storm Coaster right next to each other in the middle of the park. So I figured, let's book it to that back middle of the park and ride those first. So that's what I did. The whole crowd went to the right, and I kept going down this path, past all of these animal experiences that we'll come back to later, all the way down this pathway. And then I cut into Nickelodeon Land here, and that's because it's actually a bit confusing. If you go this way to the left, then you get into more of the animal lands here, and you can't actually get to the roller coasters unless you go around the back. It's a bit confusing, but the entryway from this side to these roller coasters is through Nickelodeon Land and under this little overpass here. So I went straight there, and I first got on the Jet Rescue Coaster on the right, and I was there at 10:13 a.m. And I guess they weren't expecting anybody to go straight to that roller coaster first thing, because they weren't even quite ready for me yet. The rope was still up, so I had to wait for a minute while the staff finished what they were doing, prepping the cars, the train, and came over and lowered the rope and let me in. And I was the only one there, even after I took the time to put my stuff in a locker, because this roller coaster really does not allow any room for bringing anything on the ride with you. The cars are a pretty cool shape. The seats are really interesting. It's like you're sitting on a jet ski, and it's really cool, but it doesn't really allow for storage of any kind. So they have lockers that are free while you're riding the ride. And after putting my stuff in the locker and walking over, they still weren't quite ready for me. And even then, I was still the only one riding the ride, which is crazy. So I got to be in the very front row all by myself, and I got the whole car, the whole train to myself, and it was fantastic. It was a very fun ride. It's very fast, and there is a double launch. There are 2 launches, and again, like I said, really interesting seats. But the downside is that there really aren't any inversions. It just loops around really fast, and it is quite short. So it was a fun ride, but not necessarily one I'd be dying to do multiple times, but I'm really glad I did it. And then after I got off that ride, I just popped right over next door to Storm Coaster, which is immediately next door. It's so fast to get between the 2. And I was at Storm Coaster at 10:24, and again, no wait, although I wasn't the only one this time. There were a few other people there riding with me, but I still got the front row, which was great because this is a water ride. It's a really interesting kind of mix of a coaster and water ride. I've never really seen something like this before. It goes up. Like there's, first an ascent, kind of like a roller coaster, and then you ride around a bit, like on a roller coaster, and then you dive and do the traditional log flume, water drop that then splashes you. And then afterwards, there's a bit of like a dark ride where you go through a bunch of scenes with your rescue boat, and everything's gone haywire, and there's stuff splashing all over the place and exploding, and you're getting even more wet, and it's pretty cool. I mean, the theming is really good, and it's a roller coaster and it's a water ride. It's a pretty inventive ride. I definitely rode this a few times, and being in the front row, I got so drenched, which was actually a good thing because it was really hot that day. So actually did not mind that at all. After I rode those two, then I came back out into Nickelodeon Land and down around through here to the edge of New Atlantis, which is a new land here. And the very edge of that here was Leviathan, which is the most popular roller coaster in this park. But the reason I went to these first is because Leviathan didn't open yet. It didn't open until 11 a.m., an hour after park open. I guess they were still testing it. They weren't quite ready to open it. So it's very good that I did these first and then came over to Leviathan. And I got there a couple minutes before 11. It was perfect timing. I was there at like 10:55. So I just hung around for a few more minutes while they finished and got ready to open it. And then they opened up the queue at 11, but they still weren't completely ready for us. So they just loaded us halfway into the queue to just sort of prep us. But it was a way to let those of us who were standing around waiting for the ride to open, a way to get us in and get us queuing up at least. So there were a few other people that were doing the same thing as me, waiting for this ride because, again, this is the most popular ride in this park. But I was still 7th in line, waiting in mid-queue when they let us in ahead of time. So when the ride actually fully opened and we got on the ride at 11:15, I was in immediately, the first train of the day, and I loved this ride. The theming in this ride is also incredible. Go inside this kind of dark, spooky cave because Leviathan is this underwater dragon-like creature. He's a mythical creature who is the guardian of Atlantis. And he is angry with you for entering his lair, but then he wants to test you to see whether you are worthy of also being a guardian of Atlantis. And there's a really cool show on these screens all around you in the loading area while you're waiting to get on the ride, kind of swimming around all sides of you, including above you. It's really cool. And then the actual ride is fantastic. It is the longest and most exciting ride in the park. Now, there are no inversions on this one either. It's a wooden coaster. But it was still super fun, super fast, very thrilling, and you can actually pay extra. I think it's $25 extra to ride it backwards. So the very back seats in the train actually facing backwards, so folks can ride it backwards if they so choose, but you have to pay extra to do that. And I just had so much to do this day that I just decided that wasn't really worth it, to do that. So I did not pay extra for that experience, though I imagine it would have been really exciting. So I rode Leviathan. That was amazing. I made a mental note to ride that again later in the day. And then I was a bit hungry. It was 11:45 at this point. So I made my way over to the food area. So if we go over to where the food is over here, there are a bunch of food options all in the same kind of food court area, and that's the Village Bean, Prime Burgers. There's a few that are all in this like K2, K3 kind of area. It also has a frozen Coke station and a bunch of shopping, but that's all right in here. So again, if we're going to K and 2, that's all in this area over here. So from Leviathan, it was pretty easy, hop, skip, and jump over to the food area. And I was pretty hungry, so I've discovered that in the Village Bean, which, by the way, they have in most all of the Australian theme parks, they had a bunch of different smoothies. So I decided to get the detox smoothie for $10, and it was the perfect, light, healthy, tasty, affordable breakfast. So I had that, and I made a mental note of some of the other food places there that I might want to come back to for lunch, because this is the primary food location. There are a couple other places you can eat. There's Dockside, which is another kind of major location in L4, and that's a big sit-down spot right around here. So with Smoothie in hand, I decided to walk around and just see what else there is to do at this park. I was very excited to see the new Atlantis land because there's a whole bunch of nooks and crannies and hidden areas that you can explore and try to solve the mystery and decode messages. It's pretty cool. And there's also 2 other rides in New Atlantis. There's Trident and Vortex. Now, sadly, Trident was not running while I was there. It's a quite high spinning ride. I sometimes enjoy those. I'm not always in the mood, but I probably would have ridden it that day if it had been running. And Vortex was quite an interesting ride where you sit in a long row of seats that then, as a whole row, gets lifted up in the air and flipped around on its long ends, almost like you're on a spit on the fire. It's very interesting, and it didn't really look all that exciting. I just wasn't feeling it, so I decided not to ride Vortex, but I did wander around New Atlantis a bit, which was a very cool land. I then also decided to just see what else was in Nickelodeon land. There were a lot of very cute family rides in there and places to explore, which was very, very cute. And then I decided to also just see what was going on in the back of the park, because there's a lot of animal lands, and that's kind of the main attraction to SeaWorld. Is amazing for their animal conservation and care and, wildlife rescue and educational elements, and their animal exhibits are really, really fantastic. But I wanted to just kind of get the other lands out of the way before I spent a considerable amount of time on the animals. So I went all the way back here, past all the animal lands, to Castaway Bay, which is the water park, kind of water play area in the back here. It's not a full water park. Again, that water park is Wet and Wild here, and which is a whole separate park nearby. So Castaway Bay is just sort of, if you want to get a little wet, there's some games and splash pad play areas, and there is even a water ride that you can ride on. That's a slow-moving boat ride where you can shoot each other with water guns on the ships. It's pretty cool. And a whole jungle gym exploration area that's being splashed with water. And it's very refreshing, very cool. I wandered around that a little bit because it was very hot, so that was refreshing to do for a minute. But I started to run out of time because there was one animal show in particular that I really wanted to catch. Now, the animal lands just have the animals out and, roaming around and living their daily lives all throughout the day, but they do educational talks at each of the lands at different times throughout the day as well. And there's one talk I really wanted to make, and that was in the Shark Bay, because I love sharks. And their talk was at 1 p.m., so it was getting close to 1 o'clock by this point, so I decided to just leave Castaway Bay and come down here to Shark Bay, which, as you can see here, is at F2, right? So that's F and 2, and that's right here. So then I went to the Shark Bay educational talk, and it was fantastic. They have walking paths above water where you can look down and see sharks and other fish swimming around. But then you can go down into their underwater viewing area, and it is gorgeous down there. They have huge windows with great views into all their tanks with all of their amazing wildlife down there. They have so many different kinds of sharks and fish, including they have some rays as well, and different kinds of rays, which is really interesting, and some that are just huge and look like birds flying through the air, and it's really incredible, the fish they had down there. And they had one particularly big shark who's sort of the king of the tanks in there. Our guide who gave the educational talk was really lovely and introduced him and everyone else, and in the tank, and we learned a lot about them. So it was a wonderful talk. I'm really glad I made that talk. And then after that talk finished, I decided to explore more of the animal lands. This was the perfect time to continue that trend and see all the other animals in this area. So I started with Ray Reef, which is right here, or according to our map here, is at I-3. I-3 is right here, and Ray Reef was a wonderful place to explore and learn more about these wonderful animals. They had informational signs all around the pools themselves where you could reach in and actually pet the rays. And of course they had guidelines on how to do that safely without upsetting the rays, what parts of the ray to touch on their body and what part not to touch. And of course it's really fun to pet the rays because they're very slippery and soft. There were a lot of kids there, of course, enjoying that rays petting area. So that was really lovely. And then next, I popped over to the polar bear shores, which also, again, had an above water and below water viewing areas. Unfortunately, it was quite hot this day, so the polar bear wasn't really out. He was kind of sitting way in the back in the shade, trying to stay cool, so I didn't get a great look at the polar bear, but still learned a lot about him, a lot of informational signs around this land as well, of course, about polar bears and SeaWorld's conservation efforts around them. Then I continued over to Penguin Point, which, if we look over here, there's two different penguin lands in this park. There's Penguin Point and Penguin Encounter. And I know it sounds a bit confusing, which is which, but Penguin Point is a different species of penguin that look like baby penguins. They are so cute. They are absolutely adorable. And Penguin Encounters for the larger penguins, the emperor penguins, the bigger, more typical species they're probably more familiar with. But the Penguin Encounters at the front of the park here, and Penguin Point is in this back area. So I decided to pop back to Penguin Point, which is at F4. So that's F here and 4, and that's over here. And it was really fun to see the penguins, the little, tiny, adorable penguins. Oh, they were swimming around a lot and chasing each other. And then there was just another group of them hanging out, just sort of standing in a line up on the edge, on the shore, at the edge of the water, just preening themselves and having a grand old time. They were very entertaining to watch. It was really fun. I spent a good amount of time just standing there watching these adorable little animals and reading more informational signs about them, learning more about them. So then from Penguin Point, instead of this direction, I went this direction over to Seal Harbor, which has, as you can guess it, seals. And the seals were just lazing around, some in the water, some out of the water, making a lot of noise and just being very, very lazy. Perfect lazy day. So they were really fun to watch for a little while. And right next to Seal Harbor is Dolphin Bay. And this one's not really labeled on here. There's the Dolphin Nursery listed on here, but there isn't really Dolphin Bay. But this was an area over this way, and it kind of coincides with the Dolphin Beach Stadium back here, which is where the Dolphin Affinity presentation, the dolphin show, is. So that whole land is where you can see dolphins, and the dolphins weren't really out at this time either. I saw a few swim by, and one just sort of hanging around and people watching, but not quite as energizing of activity in that area, but still fun to take a look at. Now, with the seals and the dolphins, and really with all of the animals, there is an extra level of experience you can pay for that is an additional cost to do private experiences or group experiences up close and personal with these animals. And that's what these animal adventures are all about. So let's take a quick look at what animal adventures they offer at SeaWorld in Australia. This is a little pamphlet all about them. So they have the Dolphin Deepwater Adventure, which is water-based. See a dolphin like never before in this deepwater dolphin experience where you learn all about these beautiful mammals. So you can get up close and personal with them here. And then the Dolphin Family Adventure is also a water-based adventure where you create special memories with your family in this shallow water encounter with a dolphin. So in this one, I think you're getting into the deep water here, and this one's just in the shallow water. And the difference is the age and height requirements. Obviously, you need to be taller and older to do the deep water experience. And this one is more, friendly for the whole family. And then there is a whole different experience that's even more mild, just Meet the Dolphin, which is a semi-water-based adventure where you can see a dolphin in knee-deep water and enjoy an amazing interaction with these beautiful mammals. And you can see these kids just in shallow water, just standing, petting the dolphin who's right next to them. And also a lower height and age requirement for this one. So that's the dolphins. Oh, there's even more dolphin experiences. Dolphin Aqua Adventure Child. Water-based adventure. Give your child an incredible up-close experience with a dolphin in a shallow water encounter. So this is, I guess, another shallow water encounter for a specific age group of kids. It has an age ceiling, I suppose, so you have to be between 5 and 13 years old to do this one. It's probably catered specifically to what kids might enjoy. And there's the Dolphin Couple Adventure. Oh, how romantic. Water-based adventure. Dive in and enjoy a private experience for 2 adults to interact with some of SeaWorld's inquisitive dolphins with a trainer in this deep water encounter. So it's just you two and a trainer in a very intimate encounter with a very inquisitive dolphin. So that would be really, really fun to do. Now, moving on, we have the Tropical Reef Snorkel. Oh, and this is water-based as well. Get up close and personal with an array of amazing marine creatures during your very own adventure in SeaWorld's Tropical Reef Lagoon. Now, this reef lagoon, I believe, is also where Shark Bay is. It's a whole reef that just has other animals, other water animals. So that's a really lovely just snorkeling experience. Then also in the Shark Bay area, there's a Shark Bay Discovery water-based adventure where you can delve below the surface at the beautiful Shark Bay and enjoy an encounter with both the Shark Lagoon and the Tropical Reef Lagoon. See, this is the Tropical Reef Lagoon and this is the Shark Lagoon, and they're right next to each other. So you can have a double experience in both lagoons with this one, which I imagine is a little more expensive. Then over here we have seal encounters. Oh, fun and adventures. So the seal encounter is land-based. Come face to face with our playful and lovable seals. Meet various species of seals, which may include long-nosed fur seals, Australian sea lions, or Californian sea lions, and even get to see a number of seal behaviors. So that's a lower age and height requirement, and it's on land. And then in the water is the Seal Aqua Adventure. Say hello to a seal in a water-based interaction whilst seeing their amazing underwater skills. So that must be fun to go swimming with the seal, but you have to be older and taller to do that. There's a behind-the-scenes Polar Bear Shores experience that's land-based. Go behind the scenes and learn about the polar bear's impressive abilities and how we care for them at SeaWorld. And the Penguin Arctic Adventure that's land-based as well. Step onto the ice and into your very own Antarctic adventure in the amazing frozen world of penguins And this one is at the penguin encounter area. That's here, not at the penguin point. So very important distinction. And that is all of the animal adventures that you can pay extra to do. And the back of this, I love, they talk about the SeaWorld Foundation, which is all about research, rescue, and conservation. And this is something that SeaWorld is very passionate about, and they talk a lot about all throughout the park, their dedication to protecting marine animals and marine life. It's really incredible what they do, and they, of course, accept donations. There are places to donate around the park as well, and it's really beautiful. Okay, so back to the rest of my adventures. Now, before I got to the animal experiences at the front of the park, I was quite a bit hungry, so I decided to get lunch, and this was at about 2:30 in the afternoon at this point. So I decided to come back over to the food court area here and get myself some food at Prime Burgers, which is one of the locations that I identified over here that I thought I scoped out earlier in the day and thought looked good. Now, a pro tip I do a lot at theme parks is get the kids meal, because it's often cheaper and a smaller portion. And just for little old me, that's all I really need for the day. So I got the kids meal chicken nuggets and chips, which was $16, and it came in this really cute little cardboard box that was actually quite adorable. You know, it wasn't really anything exceptionally well made that was a souvenir to take home with you, but cute presentation. And then while I was over there, it was very hot and I was starting to dip in energy a little bit, hit that afternoon slump. So I decided to get a frozen Coke as well, which was also right over there. And it was only $6, which was a great deal, I thought. So I sat down to enjoy my frozen Coke and my kids' meal, chicken nuggets and chips. Of course, chips being the British/Australian version of chips, because, you know, Australia is a British colony after all, so they do things a lot like the Brits do, and we in America are the weird ones who call them fries. So after I enjoyed that delicious lunch, then I felt refueled and re-energized and ready to see all the rest of the animals in the park. So from there, I explored back up this way to see all the other animals this direction. Right around here is the Sandy Shores area where there are more seals, and also locations where they do shows and presentations, and where they can do a lot of the private experiences, the animal adventures I mentioned earlier. A lot of those happen in this area. And then right next to that is the Seabird Rehabilitation Pool and that area, which is right here. And it's a really lovely little pocket where you just see a bunch of different species of birds all hanging out, some very large, some very small. It's a fun little amalgamation of these birds all in one place. And then just past that was an indoor experience, the Sea Jellies Illuminated. This was an incredible exhibit to walk through and learn a lot about all these different kinds of jellyfish, including a whole room where there are bioluminescent sea jellies, which was just incredible. And they did a really cool trick with mirrors in that room, so it looked like there was just an endless amount of these sea jellies filling the room, these glowing, color-changing sea jellies filling the whole room. It was really, really incredible and very educational, which is SeaWorld's whole bit. And then, after that experience, I popped up to the penguin encounter. Now, this is where the larger penguins are, and there's a wonderful, huge indoor exhibit here as well, with a whole lot of educational information about penguins. You know, how they interact and care for one another, how SeaWorld takes care of them. It was really beautiful exhibit, very, very educational. And then, of course, really lovely view into their habitat. And I caught the very end of the penguin feeding time. So there was a staff member in there who was finishing off feeding the penguins, and she was tossing some last bits of fish into the water, and some of the penguins who were brave enough were diving in after those final bits of food that she had left in the bottles. It was really fun to watch. So that was a really lovely time spent exploring all of those. And then I thought I had plenty of time before the next Thunder Lake stunt show. Again, that was high on my priority list, but I thought there was a 4:15 p.m. show. So in the meantime, I did a couple more things. I put back over to Dockside, not to the cafe location, but to the photo lab. Right next to it is the Dockside Photo Lab, where you can buy your photo pass or your individual photos of your ride photos and your animal experiences photos and all that sort of thing. And I wanted to buy my ride photos and discovered that I could get an unlimited photo pass that was good for 2 weeks across all the Village Roadshow parks for only $65, which was a really good deal considering that I had the escape pass, so I could use that across 3 days and all 3 parks, or rather the 2 parks that I was planning to visit with my escape pass. So I went and bought that first. And then I went back up from there over to the SeaWorld Lake area for the stunt show to wait around. And while I was waiting, I decided to try a churro. There are a bunch of different snack options up in that kind of entryway area. That's where the park entrance is, and there's a bunch of seating up there that's overlooking the SeaWorld Lake. Of course, there's stadium seating inside the SeaWorld Lake area for the actual stunt show, but above that, there's kind of a balcony, and then there's tables and chairs where you can sit, and you can get food and just sit and relax there. So that is what I did for a little bit. I got a churro because I just had to try a churro and see how they compare to our beloved Disneyland churros. And you know, they actually were comparable. They were not bad. It was $6, and it was surprisingly good. It was very warm and freshly sprinkled with cinnamon sugar, and very crispy on the outside and soft and gooey on the inside. It was very good churro. I was kind of surprised, actually. Pleasantly surprised. On par with Disneyland, I'd say. And that brought my whole expense of food for the day to $38, of course, which is Australian, so that's actually more like $25 in US, which is not bad for a full day's worth of food in the park. So now I figured it was about time for the stunt show to start. And I waited and waited, and nothing happened, and nobody was getting ready, and I started to wonder what was going on. So finally I asked a staff member, and to my great disappointment, I learned that there were only 2 shows that day that happened already. It was an 11 a.m. and a 1:15, but the 4:15 showing was not happening that day because there was a big carnival event happening that evening that they were preparing for. So very sadly, I had missed out on the stunt show, which is one of the key things I really wanted to see. But to make up for my disappointment, I just decided to go back and ride Leviathan again. So instead, I made my way around back through New Atlantis, the fun way, past the really big statue and into the main entrance of New Atlantis. And I rode Leviathan twice. I just kept riding it until they shut down the line for the park to close. And they closed down the line while I was riding it the second time. So I really made full use of that. And that was incredible. And by the time I got off the ride, the park was closing. So then I made my way back to the front and through the gift shop that's at the exit, and made my way out of the park, back through the parking lot, and down the street to the bus stop to catch the 7:05 local bus back to my hostel in Surfer's Paradise. Now, because I was so disappointed that I didn't get to see the stunt show, and I did have 2 more days in theme parks, and I already knew what I was doing with one of those days, I had a day to spare. And I decided, you know what, we're going to come back to SeaWorld because I want to see that show. So I decided to come back the following Monday and really fully use my escape pass. On this day, I went a little bit later in the day because, again, this time I really just was there to see the stunt show. I didn't need a rope drop. I'd already done the roller coasters. In my mind, that's the main thing I was just going to come and do. So I got on the bus at 10:50 this time, about an hour later. And there was only one other person on the bus, which I took as a good sign. I hoped that meant that the park wouldn't be too busy. And it was a shorter bus ride than usual. It's normally a half an hour bus ride from Surfer's Paradise to SeaWorld. There's only a 20-minute ride because there were a lot fewer people getting on and off the bus. And I got to the entrance and through the entrance of the park at 11:10 a.m. And it was perfect because as I walked in, I checked the app and the show times for all of the shows in the park, and I realized that another show I hadn't seen yet was about to happen, and that was the dolphin show at the back of the park. It was happening at 11:30. So I decided to go see that first. I made my way back, and on the way back I peed on the way because I had chugged a whole cup of caffeine on the bus ride there. So I went to the bathroom and then continued back to the dolphin show. Now when I got there, the staff member there was just closing off this entranceway here into the Dolphin Stadium, and I freaked out. I thought I'd missed my chance to see the show, but he just was redirecting the rest of traffic to the back of the stadium. So he walked me back around to the back of the stadium. He was lovely. We had a lovely chat on the way. I learned he's from the UK and he just started at SeaWorld. This was his second day. Very, very lovely, lovely gentleman. And then he let me in the back, and there was still plenty of seating, so I got a really good seat. And I got to watch this really amazing dolphin show. You know, there were dolphin trainers that were showing off what their dolphins can do, having them do fun tricks and big jumps, coordinated moves together. And it was just darn adorable. It was a really, really great show. So I'm really glad that I went and saw that show. Also making the most of this day. So after the show, it was, about 11:50, and the stunt show that I knew I wanted to make that day was at 1:15. And I knew for sure it was happening at 1:15. I learned my lesson. I asked and confirmed that it was happening at that time. But I still had some time to kill between then and now. So I decided, let's see if I can ride those roller coasters again, just while we're killing time. So I came back through the back entrance to the Storm Coaster and Jet Rescue Coaster, and I rode both of them one more time. First I rode the Storm Coaster, and I got there at about noon, and it was a 20-minute wait, which was actually kind of surprising. It was also a very hot day, in the middle of the day, but only a 20-minute wait. And I sat in the second row this time and still got basically as wet, which is amazing. So it kind of seems like no matter where you sit in the boat, you get the same amount of drenched, which is nice. Again, really hot day, so it's very refreshing. And then I popped over to the Jet Rescue Coaster. I was there at 12:20, and this was only a 15-minute wait. And I got to ride in the back of the train this time, on the left side, on the other side, and it was a wonderful ride. Again, fun, very exciting, very thrilling, very fast, but very short. So it was great to do that again, but that was about all I needed from that ride. Again, I think I prefer Storm Coaster, and I thought to myself I might ride Storm Coaster one more time before the end of the day. Because what better way to end your day on a very hot day than to get nice and wet and then leave the park and dry off on the way home and be refreshed for the ride home. So I made a mental note to ride that at the very end of the day. But I was glad I rode the jet rescue coaster one more time just to experience that again. And now it was about 12:40, and I had time to kill before the 1:15 show, but I did not want to make the same mistake and miss it, so I just meandered nice and slowly my way back through the park, stopping and looking at things and taking photos and, just appreciating the animals and the ambiance. But I did more or less come straight back to the SeaWorld lake and hung out in this upper area once again to wait for the show to start. And I'm glad I did because the seating started to fill in a bit. Now, it was in the middle of the day, so the sun was very hot and beating down on most of the seats in the stadium seating. I was quite surprised that they didn't have a larger overhang built over the stadium, because the very back 2 rows were the only 2 rows in the shade. Everything else was in the sun. So as I was waiting, I noticed that those last 2 rows in the shade were filling up fast. So I decided to get a snack and then grab a seat and just eat my snack there. And in these food spots inside the indoor area here, there was one snack that I kind of wanted to try, and it was a cupcake. The Ocean is Calling cupcake that had a little candied decoration on the top that said the ocean is calling, and really beautiful lettering. And it was so colorful and beautiful, and I was in the mood for something sweet. A little treat for myself. So I got the cupcake. It was $4.50, and the only food I got in the park that day, so totally worth it. And then I went and found my seat in the shade. Thankfully, as one person, I could just kind of squeeze in anywhere, and found a good spot and ate my cupcake while I waited for the show to start. And then at 1:15, the Thunder Lake Stunt Show began, and it was a pretty fun show. Unfortunately, people came and sat a little late and kind of blocked my view a little bit, which was a little annoying. And the show wasn't quite as big and spectacular as I was hoping it would be. There weren't as many of the bigger stunts, but it was still a very entertaining show. The 2 hosts were very funny, very snarky with one another. It was sort of the bit was that there were 2 different crews that were vying to be the best crew on the lake, and they were trying to amp up the audience and get them to side with one or the other, and it was a little rivalry going on the whole show. It was very, very fun, very entertaining, no regrets. Very glad I came back for that show. And then, of course, after that show, I had to go ride the storm coaster one more time, like I intended, and it was still blazing hot, and I was so excited for that. So even though I was already at the front of the park, I made my way to the back of the park just for that. Completely worth it. All the way back through Nickelodeon Land and into the storm coaster entrance, and I rode that thing, and it was so refreshing. And it was nice to actually test one more spot in the boat. I sat in the very back row this time, and I still got basically as drenched as every other time. So definitely true that you get soaking wet no matter what seat you sit in. Although I chatted with some of the other people in the boat with me that time, and they said they had sat in a back row before and not gotten as wet, so it could vary. But from my experiences, I got just as soaked every single time, which again was not a bad thing. And then after that, I made my way back all the way to the front to make my way out of the park, because I had finished everything I wanted to do in this park for this day and for my whole trip. And again, I went back through the gift shop at the exit, and this time I decided to buy a couple souvenirs for my friends and family, because, we gotta bring back something for them. And among those was this magnet here that is very cute, and it says "Stay Cool," and then SeaWorld Australia, and there's a little polar bear. And I love that it's a bit of a pun, because my friends and family all very much appreciate puns. And it's also really great because it's got a thermometer on it that shows you both the Celsius and Fahrenheit, which was definitely a challenge for me to navigate on this trip to Australia, trying to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit in my head the whole time. I finally got the hang of it towards the end, but it is a bit tricky. So this was a really lovely souvenir that I got for my family at the SeaWorld gift shop. Let's tuck that back over there. Now, there were a couple other t-shirts in the gift shop that I seriously considered buying because they were also excellent plays on words and puns and fun things. It's very clever t-shirts, but I wasn't really going to have room to pack those in my suitcase and fly them home, so reality had to win in the end, but still really fun to go and shop around the exit gift shop and look at them. Okay, so then I made my way out of the park, and that concludes my visit to SeaWorld during this Australia Gold Coast trip. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I made your day a little bit happier and tinglier and more magical, or at least more amusing. Now please go watch another video, because that's how YouTube knows to care about these videos and share them with more people who could use some more thrills and chills. So you can click on this one that future me has put on the screen for you right here. Thank you again, and I will see you in that next video.